right, let's go ahead and get started, everyone. Welcome to the February Third Thursday Web Forum for the Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy, or SECAS partnership. I'm Hillary Morris. As always, I am your host, and I do user support and communications for the Southeast Conservation Blueprint. We host this web forum on the third Thursday of every month right here at 10 a.m. Eastern Time as an opportunity to share the latest updates on the Southeast Conservation Blueprint, get input and involvement from folks like y'all, and highlight exciting science and action in the world of landscape conservation in the Southeast and Caribbean. So here is our usual agenda. I'll start by introducing our speakers who will present on our topic this month. We have 3 speakers, so they'll each have basically a 15-minute slot with some time for questions in between. If there's time at the end, we can have some Q&A and discussion with the whole panel. And then I'll wrap up by previewing next month's webinar and sharing some updates from your SECAS staff team. So as you probably can see, I am recording this web forum just for the couple of people who inevitably wanted to attend but had a conflict. I will post the slides and the recording to the calendar event on the SECAS website, as well as the registration page for this webinar within a couple of days. If you ever have trouble finding the link to the recording and you want to get a hold of that, just feel free to email me and I'm happy to share it. Do we have any questions before I get started introducing our panel? All right, well, hearing none, I am really excited to introduce our 3 speakers today. We have Phil Delestrez with Georgia State Parks, Bill White with the Conservation Federation of Missouri, and John Gruchy with the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks. They're each going to be sharing their perspective on grassland and savanna conservation and restoration efforts going on within their state, and hopefully that will paint a really great broad picture of some of the amazing work that's going on across the Southeast for grasslands. Phil is going to kick us off. So Phil, you are welcome to share your screen and take it away.
Yes, I'm Phil Delestrez. I'm the Northern Resource Manager with Georgia State Parks, which is under Georgia's Department of Natural Resources. Our Georgia Department of Resources, we manage 60 properties across the state of Georgia. This little map shows some of the burns that we did across the state park system in 2025. This is a pretty typical year. We generally burn everywhere from the Blue Ridge and the Cumberland Plateau all the way down to the coastal plain of Georgia. We have several ecosystems in that range, from mountains in the north down to the coastal plain in the south, and it's always quite different. Different fuels, different weather, different soils. A lot of our challenges deal around urban, especially in the north part of the state, wildlife-urban interface. So these are a couple of the parks near our Atlanta metro area, so you could see the development around some of these park areas, which are the yellow boundaries. Up in the Cumberland Plateau, northwest Georgia, we have some remnant prairie areas. We do a lot to manage them, not just with fire, but also with some mechanical means. Sometimes we use mowing. If we don't have a good burn season, we don't get to the units. We just try to mow or bush hog them during a good seasonality that promotes the most wildflowers and native grasses. One of my favorite spots in this park is a little power line cut. It's probably only about 5 acres, but it's like remnant prairie. And there's a ton of cool plants and wildlife up there. We've been doing butterfly surveys in this area since 2018. One of our highlight species is the Diana fritillary. These are some of the wildflowers and grasses up on this power line. We have big bluestem, which is kind of rare in Georgia. It's harder to find than a lot of the other prairie grasses, as well as little bluestem, Indian grass. These are some of the wildflowers that we have on this little power line. Every time we burn it, it's like opening a treasure trove. We never know what's going to come up. So in the Ridge and Valley part of the state, we have James H. Floyd State Park, which is more of a woodland complex. There's remnant montane longleaf pine about 3 miles from this park up on Taylor's Ridge. And there's some planted longleaf pine in this park from a beetle kill back in the 90s. So it got forgotten about for a while. So we're trying to restore this section of montane longleaf pine and open the area up underneath it. You can see it's kind of struggling. There's a lot of tulip tree and sweet gum and maple competing with it right now. These are the areas of the park where we're doing some longleaf pine restoration. These are some of the herbaceous plants we've found after some of our restoration efforts. Milkweeds, rudbeckia. We had one section that was just covered with the Korean lespedeza, so we had to do a lot of spraying there, and now we have some pretty nice native grass coming back into that side. As far as the trees, we've done an assortment of treatments to help our fire regime. We're using basal barking, foliar spraying, and tree girdling. So this is like a hack and squirt method. And of course, burning with a lot of partners. Here in Georgia, we enjoy an interagency burn team, which means we could burn with several partners, including the U.S. Forest Service, the Nature Conservancy, Fish and Wildlife Service, our Georgia, other agencies in DNR, like our Wildlife Resources people, as well as some of the private citizens who just like to come and burn and get trained. Chattahoochee Bend State Park is in kind of the lower part of our Piedmont. It's got a mixture of habitats there from open grassland, pine savanna, granite outcrops, and some remnant old longleaf pine, montane longleaf pine. So we do a lot of burning at this site to encourage these types of habitats. There's also some cool glade habitats in this park as well. Some of the interesting plants we've been finding, some of these right after the burns, lady slippers, trilliums, bee balms. One of my favorite finds there was a Diana fritillary butterfly, which was pretty far south on its range, and this was visiting bergamot the season after we burned, which was pretty exciting. Panola Mountain State Park near Atlanta. We have some about 200 acres of grassland at that site. We've been managing it since 2000. We started collecting native grass seeds with AmeriCorps back in 2004. Had some help from some different agencies, the Nature Conservancy, Wildlife Resources folks, Georgia Forestry Commission have all helped us on this site at one time or another. I like to grow plants at home, so on a good year, I could grow enough plants to keep an army of volunteers active on a work day. And of course, working with some of our folks and Wildlife Resources who've helped us a lot in restoring these meadows and prairies. There's a bird banding station on this site as well, which is kind of detailing the amount of birds that are using this habitat. And they're finding there's a lot of birds that they're recapturing. So these birds have a fidelity to this area. So they're doing well. They keep coming back. In a woodland section near the grassland, we've been working with Birds Georgia, which used to be the Georgia Audubon Society, and we're also doing some tree girdling. They help us burn, so we just have a good partnership with them developing habitat. Lots of butterflies. I'm a big butterfly person, so I'm always eager to go out and see what's using the pollinator plants on these meadows and prairies that we're restoring. And lots of wildflowers and other pollinators as well. Just really important places. Mistletoe State Park, which is kind of in the Piedmont, but on the eastern side of the state near the Savannah River, we have some really cool, these are loblolly and shortleaf pine kind of savannas. And again, girdling trees mixed with fire. We're trying to open up the woodland so that we have that herbaceous component underneath. And these are kind of the results of the work. We're creating gaps in the canopy and some more open space with lots of different native grasses using those areas now. So we found Indian grass come back in abundance. When we started burning at this park, we never saw that species. And as soon as we started burning, we're seeing more and more of it. So it's really cool to see that. Working with the Army Corps of Engineers, we've found that there is native longleaf pine in this area. Longleaf pine is a very fire-dependent species, so we're working with them on the site to restore some longleaf pine at this Mistletoe State Park site. So we found that fire plus mechanical work and just sticking with it creates a lot of wildlife opportunities. In Georgia State Parks, we have a lot of visitors. So we try to manage some of these properties so that the public can come out and really enjoy some of these wild spaces. And that's the end of my slideshow, I think. Yep. So I did it all in 12 minutes. So thank you all for listening. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Phil. That's fantastic just to hear a little bit about the management that you're using in Georgia State Parks. Phil, I know does have to drop off a little bit early. Yeah, absolutely. The pictures were so engaging. So this is your chance to ask any questions to Phil, and we do have plenty of time. So probably we could spend 5 minutes on questions here since you did such a great job sticking to time. Does anyone have any questions for Phil? Jim Cooper, I see your hand, and you're welcome to use the chat as well, folks.
Hey, Phil, thanks so much. And I apologize. I came in about 5 minutes early. And so if you addressed this previously, I missed it. But I think one of our questions is we have folks who are really enthusiastic about meadow and prairie habitat on existing turf areas. And that is, especially when dealing with nonprofit folks or other clientele without a ton of means to be able to pay for site prep. I'm just wondering, in that kind of application where you're looking to convert like mowed, maintained turf to meadow, what are some of the lower cost or even irrespective of cost, most effective ways to prep that turf to receive this kind of treatment?
So we actually, this area at Panola Mountain State Park was a fescue Bermuda grass pasture before we started converting it to native grasses. We've been working there since 2001, and every year there's still maintenance to do. So it's never a one and done situation, especially if we have that kind of disturbance. So what we generally do is if you have things like Bermuda, or what location are you at, sir?
I'd say kind of a generic question for like mid-Atlantic into the Southeast, but thereabouts, so East Coast.
So generally what we use is a Mazapir mixtures to knock out the non-native grasses. If that's too pricey, depending on how much acreage you have, we found just burning in the growing season helps a lot, like April, May, in terms of, especially if you have fescue, it kind of really knocks it back a lot. And you'll get things like broom sedge and some of those natives kind of moving in pretty quickly on their own. So if you're looking for a cheaper way to go, that's a pretty good way to go. But if you really want to be like a purist and want to get rid of all that non-native stuff, we've used the Mazapir mixtures to knock out Bermuda grass and fescue, and then plant mixes of native grass seed. We do a lot of seed harvesting. We started increased plots, and that's what Panola Mountain has kind of become now. It's over 200 acres that we've restored pretty good to Indian grass, little blue stem, some big blue stem, switchgrass, gamma grass. So our non-game agencies have actually been using that site to harvest grass now to plant in other areas nearby. So everything that we've planted is local seed source. And there are a little bit more opportunities now for that than there used to be as far as if you have to order seed. I know in Kentucky, Roundstone Seed Company is a really good source if you need to order native grass and wildflower mixtures. Does that kind of help answer your question?
I think so, and just I mean, from our perspective, some of these are larger applications, so things like stripping are not really going to be feasible just cost wise. So we're really kind of wondering, and also the flip side of that is that fire management in a lot of these areas is not really kosher either because it's too close to. I mean, some of that is just perception, but realistically close to structures though in some areas where fire might not be feasible. So really just thinking about like lower cost ways to really start to get meadow communities to start when we're planning through turf and just trying to figure out how best to do that.
Sure. Well, the good news is imazapyr is pretty widely used, and it's pretty cheap for an herbicide. And it does a really good job depending on what you're trying to get rid of. Blackberries are sort of immune to imazapyr, so if you have blackberries, there's a chance they might kind of take over quickly after you get rid of their competition. But sometimes just mowing during the right regimes and leaving it grow back in the later part of summer into fall is going to favor some of your warm season native grasses.
Right. Could you spell imazapyr? I'm sorry. It's a new term.
I'm a horrible speller. Imazapyr.
Gotcha. Thanks so much, Phil. I appreciate it.
Would you happen to know what turf grasses you're targeting?
Probably a good mix of what you described, fescue in some spots and then Bermuda and others, really depending on sun exposure and that sort of thing. So,
yeah, that's one of the cheaper herbicides, and it could still be a little costly, but you're only using it a couple ounces per gallon. So depending on how much area you got to spray, and then the seed's going to be kind of pricey too if you have to buy native grass seed. But there might be organizations that could help you a little bit. Maybe there's like a native plant society, or maybe there's some grants that you could apply for to actually get the native plant mixes that you need for the area.
Right. Last question, I promise. After herbicide application, is there anything that you will typically or atypically do with additional just soil surface prep? Would you disc that to break up the turf mat, or is that something that just gradually kind of breaks up after herbicide application in a growing season or so?
Your best bet would probably be using like a seed drill, and so you don't disturb once you kill the weedy stuff on top. If you till it, you're probably going to reawaken a whole bunch of seeds of weedy stuff underneath.
Right.
So if you could find someone who could maybe loan you or rent you a seed drill, that's probably the best way to go. Once you get rid of most of your non-native stuff, that's probably the way to go to plant your natives.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for the questions.
And we do have 2 questions in the chat. We'll have to be kind of quick, just so we don't cut into the next speaker's time. But question from Simon Gregg about whether you all also do any hydrologic restoration efforts in conjunction with your management efforts in places that may have been ditched or drained.
Yeah, actually at Panola Mountain we have. We actually have a wetland that's underneath Georgia Power line. And we got a grant back in 2003, a NIFWIF grant, a National Fish and Wildlife Federation grant, to work with Georgia Power and just kind of block some of those dams. We built some berms, and they have sluice gates on them, but we never use them. But they do hold back the water now when we have rain events, and it kind of naturally stays wet in the areas that should stay wet. It's created a really nice kind of matrix of habitat in that area.
Great,
kind of a wet meadow. Mm-hmm. Sure.
And then last question from Maya. This I suppose could probably be a presentation on its own, but could you briefly talk about your longleaf pine savanna restoration methods, if to the extent that you're involved in that? Yeah,
unfortunately, in a lot of our Georgia state parks, these habitats have kind of been neglected a bit, and we just since 2010 we developed this resource management unit. So I'm a northern resource manager. There's also a southern resource manager. The 2 of us work together, but there's only 2 of us basically covering all the state parks in Georgia. So it's better than nothing, but we're trying to play catch up. So we do a lot of girdling on trees. It's hard to get timber management on state parks as well. So that's one of our challenges. So we actually have to go in and selectively girdle trees to open up areas around the longleaf pine. We do have some nice tracks where we have nice open longleaf pine savanna, and we do our best to maintain those with fire. but a lot of tracks still need quite a bit of work to get them back to that place. We were actually looking at a lot of sites yesterday just like that. We have a lot of work to do.
Thanks so much. I'm going to move us along here just for time. So Bill White, I think you are up. He's the Grassland Program Coordinator for the Conservation Federation of Missouri. He's going to talk to us a little bit about his grassland restoration efforts. You are welcome to share your slides and take it away.
Can you see my slides and hear me?
I sure can.
Okay. So good morning, everybody. And I'm really embarrassed because I'm going to have to step up my game on the beautiful photos like Phil shared. I do not have that in my program for sure. I wanted to talk about some of the efforts we've got in Missouri. And most recently is the formation of a Native Grasslands Collaborative. We're pretty new. I started my position last July, and we're just getting our feet on the ground and rolling. But it was an effort by partners to expand native grass plantings, preserve what prairie we've got left, and then promote awareness of grassland and their benefit to humans and livestock and everything else on the spectrum there. So I did want to go through kind of how we got formed. And it's been almost a 3-year process now. In the early 2022, a small group of partners got together to figure out how we could go about expanding native plantings. I think a lot of the interest at that time was in forage plantings, and that led to a summit that was held in 2024. We had 325 people in attendance, and that spurred the partners on that, yeah, there's an interest there. We need to do something. We followed up. We got a lot of input from that summit, thousands and thousands of suggestions. And so we got together with a smaller group of partners and tried to focus in on the most important of those recommendations and move forward. NRCS and Missouri Department of Conservation were key in helping us set up the summit and the partner workshop, and then gave us direction to try and move forward with some of the recommendations from that. And some of those recommendations were to form a collaborative, which we've done with a steering committee and then hire a coordinator, which is me. And then in part, develop a resource library aimed at technical staff, as well as newsletter and social media and so on. We were in communication with the South Dakota Grassland Coalition. They had already gone through the process of setting up a charter, so we kind of Missouriized it and started moving forward. We've got a lot of diverse interests in Missouri related to native grass, from pollinator and other wildlife type of plantings, again, native forages, prairie preservation, landscaping with natives, and the list goes on. So when we put our steering committee together, we tried to get representatives from each of those special interests. We're using our steering committee to lead some action teams that are going to focus on some of the biggest issues we've got going on in the state right now. And so some of our priorities that those groups have come up with is because of the constant churn and turnover in staffing, especially in the technical cost share agencies, trying to increase proficiency of all those new staff. Again, expand plantings, promote the economics. That was one of the downfalls we thought of getting natives out there on the landscape, prairie awareness, and protecting the prairie remnants. We've got less than 1/10 of 1% of our prairie remnants left on the landscape. About half of those are in private land ownership. And we're in the process of developing a strategic plan to kind of put those priorities in motion. So one of the things we've been doing is a social media blitz, and trying to put stuff out there that people normally don't see. And people, I mean the general public, as well as agency and partner staff. So this was about crop field buffers, using natives, some of the wildlife we find in our grasslands, impact of grazing on natives. This has been my most popular post so far. I got a comparison of tall fescue roots and big blue stem roots there. And a lot of it focuses on making sure people are aware of some of the signups and opportunities out there. We put together a YouTube channel where we're posting some of our webinars that we've held. And so we're getting quite a bit of use of different people around the country actually looking at these webinars. We're trying to fill some gaps, especially there on the right. There's some technical information gaps out there, and so we're trying to fill some of those with some BMPs. On the left, one thing we're trying to do is get everybody moving together in a unified approach, and so here we're promoting the crop field buffers in the continuous CRP program. And so we've got FSA is going to send this out in their monthly newsletter. I think we've got MFA, which is a landowner cooperative with 45,000 members, going to send it out. And I believe Soybean Association is going to send it out to their members also. We've got a website put together. It's a resource library of technical documents and podcasts and videos and pertinent things that we can find. The aim is to help new staff learn about the use of natives and learn about prairie preservation, and then that's available to the landowners they work with also. We're doing a lot of training sessions trying to meet our goal, our objective of increasing staff proficiency. We're going to delve into landowner workshops this summer. Some of the things that our partners are doing started about the time we started having the conversations to hold that 2024 summit. USDA has a native forage initiative. They're using the expedited Act Now process. It's been going on 3 years, and they've spent $9 million on native forages establishment. EQIP has a wildlife fund pool in Missouri that spent a record $3 million this last year, and the majority of that goes into monarch butterfly habitat. We've got Working Lands for Wildlife in both quail and monarchs. That's bringing in some cash to landowners, as well as the regular EQIP and CSP programs in USDA, bringing in additional millions because we have native grass establishment as a priority in Missouri. Trying to put on a lot of grazing specialists because that expertise has kind of gone away over the years. And NRCS and MDC and some other partners are working together to add these cooperative positions. Ducks Unlimited has several staff. They're still in the process of hiring. I believe they're going to hire up to 6 staff. Missouri Cattlemen's Association has 4 staff. Quail Forever has 1 position. Missouri Forage and Grassland Council, 1 position. Missouri Department of Conservation, they continue to grow their efforts in grassland conservation, and a lot of it is based off the SWAP priority geographies and conservation opportunity areas they put together, as well as some of the quail restoration landscapes. A lot of the cost share and staffing effort is focused on the geographies you see highlighted here. And a lot of those are grassland landscapes or quail restoration areas. There's some native prairie remaining in those areas, and certainly a lot of grassland. On the Department of Conservation, they've got a private land program that puts about $3 million in cost share to private landowners. Got over 100 staff providing technical assistance. You can see the list of things they do related to grassland, and there's probably some other things I could add there. On public land, they manage over 46,000 acres a year with things like invasive species management, wood cover control for prescribed burning, And again, a lot of that occurs in those priority areas that I showed on the previous map. Our Department of Natural Resources, they have a soil and water program that spends about $50 million a year based on sales tax. And it's probably been 4 or 5 years ago now, they, for the first time, they've been in operation since 1984. For the first time, they added native warm season grass as a component to all of their soil and water practices, where seeding is a component. And then just the last couple of years, they added a warm season grass forage practice. Several of our partners do piggyback incentives on there to add diversity and even forbs to some of those plantings. And I'm going to skip some partners and some programs that are going on just because of time constraints, but there's a lot of other efforts out there, and most of these involve multiple partners. There's a Grassland Habitat Initiative that's funded by an USDA RCPP that's supposed to bring in $1.6 million a year for 5 years. And a lot of that is focused on those grassland priority and quail restoration landscapes that I showed you in that one map. We got America the Beautiful grant for $5 million, and it's aimed primarily at prairie restoration. As part of that, we were able to hire some habitat teams to help with management on those. All total, we've got 6 habitat teams between Quail Forever and the Nature Conservancy, and they're focused either on grasslands or early successional habitat. And then this number keeps growing as far as our prescribed burn associations, but we've got 18 that are active right now, and they can get grants from different partners to get prescribed burn equipment, and a lot of activity from those groups. Some of our early wins, going back to the 2024 Summit, Department of Conservation began prioritizing native grasslands through their land acquisition and some of their staffing, and some other things going on. We are, through this collaborative, developing some unified definitions, like what's the difference between a prairie remnant and a prairie reconstruction and a prairie restoration, and so on. You'd be surprised, partners, depending on which partner, had a different definition for each of those. So we're trying to do that. And we're trying to develop unified efforts, like I mentioned early on, promotion. Some of our landowner workshops will fit in that category. Again, filling the gaps on missing technical information and training. And the first in-person workshop we had earlier this month, we had over 100 people in attendance, so the interest is there. And we're rolling out that new resource library to our partners this afternoon. So I think, yeah, that is all I had. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Bill. It was fantastic to hear kind of more of the partnership building perspective in addition to the kind of more on the ground photos perspective that Phil brought. I didn't ask you to do that. Y'all just, like, you coordinated. It was perfect. We probably have time for 1, maybe 2 questions for Bill. So is there anything in the chat, or someone want to raise their hand or pop off mute and jump in?
Next time I'll work on prettier pictures to share.
Those were pretty great, Phil, but
Yep.
I liked your approach too, for what it's worth. All right, not hearing any questions, I say we go ahead and roll on. And John, if you want to take the floor, it is all yours to go ahead and share. John Gruchy is the Private Lands Program Coordinator with the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks. Feel free to take it away, John.
All right, so it kind of works out. I kind of looking at the program, I kind of figured Bill would probably talk more about prairie grasslands. And I figured we would have the Georgia folks talking a little bit about pine savanna. So, and we do both of those things in Mississippi. We actually have a prairie region of Mississippi. And then, of course, the piney woods, the South Mississippi, a lot of longleaf stuff. I decided to kind of focus a little more on our oak savanna stuff that we've done in North Mississippi. And so, and also I'm going to talk a little bit about case studies. We have a lot of the same programs that Bill was talking about in Missouri. We have that in Mississippi. We've gotten RCPPs and American Beautiful grant even, and we have staff, but it's about 90% reduction from Missouri. So Missouri has 100 biologists to do this. We've got about 8. And we give out much less money, but we're number 50 and everything anyway, so it works out. So I wanted to focus again on upland hardwoods, and one of the big things that I kind of wanted to focus on was kind of talking about the soil differences. So that's kind of been one of the frustrating things in my career. I'm mostly private lands, and I will talk about one public land site, but in the private lands arena, we have landowners that come to us with objectives, and then we have to evaluate the site and see how appropriate all that stuff is. And so we end up working on sites all across the state, but we really have to take into account the soil. So the specific sites and management that I'm going to talk about are going to be more in those poorer soil types. This is what it's going to be suited to. When we start talking about a particularly prescribed fire and we're talking about hardwoods, it's like, man, it really gets some people's hackles up, because there are really productive sites where we can grow very fine veneer, high value hardwoods. And those really aren't the types of sites we're talking about doing a lot of this type of work I'm going to talk about. And we're talking about the poorer soil. So if you look at this map here, it's an older map. Actually come from the 30s. I still like this one though. But it's those green soils that you can see, kind of the Ulta soils and the Alpha soils. You can also look, there's resources within RCS and EPA to talk about ecological site descriptions and some of the other things, and I also enjoy the fire scar work that they do. And I actually forgot to give my shout out at the beginning. The Oak Fire Science folks are really good at this, and I've enjoyed working with them in the past. But we also have GLO stuff that people have done in other states, and I'll show some of that. And then I've really also enjoyed finding some of the old stuff. We had some botanists that came in the 1800s and reading some of that stuff, looking where the remnants are, and finding reference communities in some of the places that we've worked, and kind of look at what, because we really don't have a good idea of maybe in some cases defining when we're successful, when we get to where we want to be. Now, from a private landowner standpoint, they have their own gauge for success, and it may not be based on floristic diversity or any of those kinds of things. So we kind of have to manage all that stuff as well. Just another map of the state, and this is actually looking at pre-settlement stuff with some data from Barone from Georgia. And he took the GLO stuff and did some GIS with it. And you can see most of the grasslands are on kind of the eastern side of the state, that Black Belt Prairie. Those are the shapefile with kind of the clunky purple, or I guess pink and brown colors. But we actually have some stuff along the bluff that people don't think about. And some of that is old oxbows along the kind of the Big Black River that you can see at the bottom of that insert. But if you look up and down the edge of the bluff, there's still some big patches. Those brown splotches are actually grasslands, areas that were grasslands in the 1830s. And so you got to ask yourself, why was that grassland? What was the fire history? And you can go all the way up and down the bluff and find that. Sherry Surratt did some work on that from Ole Miss, and she looked at soil. Same thing, GLO work, and looked at, topographic position and soil type. Big deal. Also, if you're working in Missouri, I would give a shout out. Bryce Hanbury does some really good job with a lot of the GLO stuff. But one of my favorites is actually a guy from Georgia who's a landscape he's an artist, but he's has a kind of a hobby of landscape ecology, and this is from his thesis. And basically, he points out, looking at kind of savanna and grasslands, as he gets into the poorer soils, the shrink swell soils, and we get a more frequent fire return interval, obviously we get more grassland cover. But topography and soils are a huge driver in all that. And I think we sometimes leave that out. And it's really easy to do when you're working with private landowners. The other side of this, when we start talking about objectives, most of our landowners are, because I work for a state game agency, most of them are going to have a game management objective. And from a savanna and grassland standpoint, that's usually bobwhites. And the big thing, besides just soils and topography, fire return interval, the kind of biological side of things, we have a landscape ecology side of things. So if we can't get to a certain amount of area, we have a hard time getting a bobwhite response. And this is just some data actually from Ames, from a project in the early 2000s, where they went in and did some savanna restoration on Ames Plantation, which is actually in West Tennessee. It's just north of the Mississippi line. And they saw a pretty decent bobwhite response. I'll talk about that a little bit more, but it was really driven by overwinter survival. So by making the habitat better, by increasing and improving ground cover, they saw increased overwinter survival in bobwhites, which led to increasing population. Kind of similarly, and not far away, we have a management area near Batesville, Mississippi, where we've done the same kind of management. We went in and opened up the hardwoods and started burning, doing some herbicide applications, things like that, and got an interesting grassland herbaceous understory. And we saw an increase in the fall bobwhite population. But the problem from a private land standpoint is even an increase, a 10-fold increase, when you have 10 times not many, it's still not many. And so sometimes we see still some landowner frustration. But more importantly, when you take those two studies and you look at maybe a moderate level of success, there's other places where they've done grassland work. And so a lot of people are probably familiar with Catoosa in Tennessee. They've done some savanna work, and they haven't really, in the literature at least, detected a quail response. And some of that is just this area issue. The landscape is not quite as suitable. So we have to always keep that stuff in mind. And a lot of that falls back to the bobwhites having a fairly small home range, not a very large dispersal distance. So sometimes it is hard to get those populations integrated in certain landscapes. So going forward, I'm just going to do a couple of quick kind of case studies, if you will, and show some pictures from a couple of sites. We've got, again, a lot of this kind of stuff we can talk about, but just in the interest of time, I'll go quick and do, I think, 3 or 4 sites. This is a site in Alcorn County, Mississippi. It's just kind of the far northeast corner of Mississippi, where this landowner has been working with us managing bobwhites for a long time. They've been doing it, before I came on with the agency. We started working with them in kind of the mid and late 2000s, and they've gone through several iterations of where they've done different management, but it's all been driven at bobwhites. So they have mixed pine hardwoods where they've been doing a lot of burning. They've done some merchantable thinning, so they've actually been able to do timber sales. We've worked with them to get herbicide injection, and they've been doing a whole lot of, as I mentioned, of burning. And so this is just some pictures on the ground as well. This is actually looking at a bobwhite hunt. They did have a moderate bobwhite response, and for this landscape, that's positive. But you can kind of see there what the ground cover looks like in the winter. And there's a cubby rise. Of course, the hunter whiffed, but you have some of that. Another interesting site is actually in Yallowbusha County, Mississippi. This is one of my favorites. It's the Bailey Tract. I started working with them when I first came on in 2006, but that had been a historic quail plantation, and just over time, they had still been doing the burning, but over time, the woods just grew up. It started to get shaded out, and they had lost a lot of the bobwhite population. So they went in, we worked together, and we did a really aggressive timber harvest on part of the area. In fact, it was basically a clear cut with reserves, I would say, and then started burning. But you can see the understory response was really phenomenal. I actually have a lot of big blue stem on this site, and a student from Kansas State was doing a blue stem genetic whatever project, and I asked for some sites, and we put him on this one, and it has a genetically distinct, this spot and another spot in Alabama were genetically distinct big blue stem populations, which was interesting to me. But you can see there's the big blue stem. The interesting thing on this site was we still had some native shortleaf, still a lot of natural shortleaf hanging out. And again, the important thing is this is really junky soil. I want to continue to emphasize that. And I've got another site I'll show in a minute with some little bit better soil where it didn't work quite as well. But you can see the different, areas where when we were doing the timber harvest, we tried to favor shortleaf. And so this is just some drone footage where you can actually see the shortleaf a little bit better. And you can see the understory again, it's winter, but that's the best way to look at the tree distribution, kind of the canopy. Most of those pines, there's a few small, submersible loblolly in there, but most of the pine is shortleaf on the ridges. And as we grade down into the loamier soil, you start to pick up that upland hardwood, and that's mostly all post oak and blackjack oak. There are a few white oak, but it's mostly, again, post oak, blackjack oak, and southern red oak. Now, this is the site that's actually public land. And this one has been really difficult. We decided to make a quail management area on a place that had fairly productive soil. It's a lot of Memphis and Loring soil, and we had a really hard time. There's agriculture in that bottom, and you can see the red soil. That's high. It's Collins soil. It's high rental rate actually, and we decided we would do native grass in that, which turned out to be kind of a bad idea. And then we, it was just too productive. We couldn't keep succession under control, and we did some upland hardwood work, which initially turned out pretty cool, but just over time, it's just so hard to keep that succession in check on those productive soils. And eventually, even with fire, and we try to vary seasonality, it's tough to make summer fire work in a hardwood stand where you've got shade. But it's just really tough on those productive sites to keep the shrubs and bushes and things out. And this is another site. This is actually in Marshall County, Mississippi, not far from the Tennessee state line, where we did the same thing. It was an old quail plantation that they had really quit burning for years and years. And we tried to go back in and do some bobwhite work, and did again an intensive timber harvest, had a pretty good merchantable thinning. And it really came back looking great after this. It looks like the site was abused at this point, but it was not. The loggers did an excellent job. And I was really excited, but then the landowner didn't like it. It was too brushy. So he went in and bought heavy equipment, and really was tough on the site. You can see what it looked like there afterwards. And of course, what we got back after the plant community, by the way, after the timber harvest was outstanding. I mean, it was really nice. And then after they went in with the heavy equipment, it ended up being solid mare's tail. But eventually it did recover. Now, we used some equip money and some other money. All these sites, we've used our funding primarily for herbicide and fire. And on this site, we actually had a backpack crew come in with Garlon and sprayed the stump sprouts, which really helped, keep the stuff down for the fire so that we could have that nice savanna. The last thing I'll say, one of the things that we've come to big problem, I guess I would say the biggest problem we have, is we can usually get funding to do the injection work. We can get funding to do fire, but we have a really hard time with timber harvest. And a lot of these properties, we've gone in and done one or two of the steps, but it's a hard time to follow through with that timber harvest. We can't get timber cut. And some of the mechanical things that people are looking at doing are just really, really expensive. So that's been a tough thing for us. And we just, of course, had an ice storm, which I don't even know. I haven't gotten out enough to look at what the ice storm did to some of these sites, but that's always in the back of our mind as well with these open canopied sites. So, and that's all I got. And that was a picture from Phil Delestrez there.
Oh, that's great. That's what Rua was sharing in the chat, I think. Those beautiful landscapes. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. We definitely have probably 5 minutes for questions. Anything specific for John?
Hi, I'm Janet Naconi, and I'm with NASA. And this is actually the first SECAS webinar that I've attended, and I found it really interesting. And I used to live in Georgia, and I know Phil Delestrez, so this has been great. But coming from my NASA perspective, I'm a geospatial scientist, and we're really interested in knowing how NASA data products are being used to help folks monitor different types of ecosystems. And grasslands are, really hard to monitor, but really critical for building our understanding. And I don't know if any of the either of the last two presenters might have comments about how they're using spatial data or satellite Earth observations to help with their monitoring efforts.
Question. Bill or John, do you want to jump in and speak to that?
Sure, I can just briefly. The state agency just is actually wrapping up a project. We paid Mississippi State Ray Igley has a student, and he's doing LiDAR stuff to be able to. We're modeling bobwhite in particular, but we're looking at site suitability, basically to try to be targeted on where we're working. But in terms of using it for monitoring, that is well above my pay grade. I'm not I'm not the technology guy. So, sorry.
I can tell you in Missouri, we do have some partners that are helping with monitoring and in some cases doing their own monitoring. Missouri Prairie Foundation on some of the remnant prairies that they control. And the Missouri River Bird Observatory is doing a lot of bird work on the grassland restoration efforts going on in Missouri. And I know the observatory is using some spatial data, but I'm kind of like John, it's not my forte. And then, of course, we use spatial data in Missouri to come up with those opportunity areas for SWAB, as well as quail restoration landscapes.
Yeah, great. That's really helpful. We're working with lots of state agencies and federal and NGO space in the conservation arena just to really understand what are some of the gaps and needs out there. So, if your teams come across any, areas of need or gaps where you're seeing where the data aren't quite there for what you need, we'd be really interested in knowing. I'll leave my email in the chat.
Yeah, please.
That'd be great. Thanks, Janet. I'm so glad that you found our web forum series and that you're here. Thanks for joining. I am going to wrap up the questions here just to make sure that we have time to preview next month's web forum. And we do have a quick update from your SECAS staff, an opportunity to get involved that I think might be of interest to folks on the line. But if we have time again at the end, I will open the floor back up for questions. Let me reshare my slides here. So next month's web forum will be same time as today, but we'll have a fresh registration link, which I will drop in the chat for anyone who would like to sign up. This is a rescheduled webinar. It was initially scheduled for October during the government shutdown, and so we had to move it. So we're having Michael Federoff with University of Alabama Conserve Research Group back, as well as Adam Griffith with North Carolina State University's Cooperative Extension Program. And they're going to be talking about regional efforts to restore river cane across the Southeast. So both Michael and Adam are active members of the River Cane Restoration Alliance. Dr. Federoff is going to be talking about one particular success story in Alabama on Tuckabum Creek in Choctaw County, which brought together a whole bunch of different partners from public and private sectors, academia, to work together. And they recently received a large NIFWIF grant from America the Beautiful to do some genetic work on river cane. That's going to be really cool. And then Dr. Griffith is going to talk about the role of river cane in stream bank stabilization after Hurricane Helene in Western North Carolina. Dr. Griffith works particularly with the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians in his role with cooperative extension. And so that's going to be a really interesting reflection on previous restoration projects and how they've been successful in that region. So I put the link to sign up for that in the chat. Definitely register for that if you are interested. And now I'm going to hand things off to Rua. He has a quick update about an opportunity to review our fire frequency indicator in the Southeast Blueprint.
Yeah, so thanks, Hillary. So one of the common themes, of course, coming through this whole talk was about fire, and historic soils and these other kind of components that we need to keep these fire-dependent ecosystems healthy. So one thing we're doing for this year within the Conservation Blueprint, we have a fire frequency indicator. We're doing a significant update of that this year to incorporate the sort of spatial mapping of not just how often fire is occurring, but are you within the historic fire regime and how far have you departed in the past? So we've got some new data thanks to Southeast Fire Map. And so there's a nice opportunity. We'd love to have you, if you're interested in this kind of thing, join one of our little 1 hour kind of review calls where we'll be talking about kind of the draft version of the indicator, get your thoughts about it. What might we be able to improve? Are you seeing what you would expect to see in places that you would expect to see in good condition or good potential restoration, those kind of things. So drop the link in the chat in there. You can just register for those if you'd like. But yeah, very excited about this update, and yeah, hopefully you'll join us. If not, we're hoping to have some new information on that coming to you soon.
Thanks so much, Rua. That'd be great to have any of y'all here to contribute to that. This is the slide I always like to end on, just how to get more involved in SECAS, especially since it sounds like we have some new folks on the line. You can sign up for our newsletter on the footer of any page of our website, secassoutheast.org, and that will get you our monthly newsletter as well as a monthly reminder email about this web forum, so you never miss a topic that's of interest to you. We definitely encourage you to connect with staff and other partners involved in SECAS. You can find all the staff contact information on our staff page. That does include a number of folks who are dedicated to full-time user support for the Blueprint. So the Blueprint's kind of the primary product of SECAS, our living spatial plan with conservation priorities region-wide. And it's our job to help anyone who is interested in using that in their work, whether that's to strengthen a grant, inform a conservation plan, inform a decision. We are here to help, and that is completely free. So we would love to hear from you if we can assist and clear barriers in your work, or if you explore the blueprint and have feedback on how we can improve it, or how we can improve the underlying data like that fire frequency indicator, please reach out and let us know. We would love to hear from you. So with that, that is all I have. So I'll say that if anyone has a parting question for Bill or John, feel free to jump in. Hearing none, I'll just say a huge, huge thank you to our speakers, Bill, who's already gone, but also thanks to Bill White and John Gruchy. It was fantastic to have you all here sharing your perspectives, and hope we'll do it again sometime. Great to see you all, and hope you'll join us again in March to learn more about River King. Take care, everyone.